The lesson is that we need to make sure that sovereign nations are in a position to defend themselves.
Do you feel confident as of this morning that we have sufficient military capacity to be a nation of military influence, not necessarily just in the next couple of years, but in the next decade and decades to come? Will there need to be a shift in how we invest in defence spending at some point, if not immediately?
I do feel we are a very strong leader at NATO, and that is what we have been doing over the past 2 days. We've had the fantastic news that Finland and Sweden is joining, strengthening our alliance. We're also more focused on being a global NATO because we don't just face the immediate threat from Russia. There is also longer term concerns about the impact of China, particularly on economic coercion and the fact that they are building up their military capabilities. And the UK has been a leading voice in the strategic concept, making sure we're focused on future challenges, as well as providing the support Ukraine needs to win this appalling war against Russia. And today, we've announced an extra £1 billion of support.
But on the point of our military position in the years to come, do you think there'll have to be a step change in how we invest in our military? We can't keep going as we are at the moment.
Well, we are clearly altering what we do dependent on the threats as they emerge. There are new threats, hybrid warfare, cyber warfare, space, which the UK is extremely active in, as well as the traditional defence capabilities that we also maintain over the longer term.
How far would Britain go in support of Taiwan, for example? Would that include providing arms to Taiwan in the face of potential Chinese aggression?
We need to learn the lessons from Ukraine. The fact is Ukraine wasn't in a good enough position to defend itself. That made it a target for Russia. And that's what we, as the free world, need to do, is make sure that Taiwan has the ability to defend itself, that we continue to maintain peace in the Taiwan Strait. And this is something that we're discussing with our allies and working on with our allies.
I'm not trying to catch you out here, but the lesson from Ukraine is we didn't arm them quick enough, soon enough, and that led to ultimately Russia feeling that they were vulnerable. Is the lesson therefore that we have to arm Taiwan as the West quicker and sooner to prevent China getting involved? Is that the lesson you think we do need to learn?
The lesson is that we need to make sure that sovereign nations are in a position to defend themselves, and
that means supplying arms.
There are different ways of doing that, and Finland and Sweden have joined NATO as a way of making sure that they are defended. But ultimately, it is making sure that those countries have the capabilities that they need.
And there's lots of psychological analysis at the moment from the British government about Putin. I don't know if you share it. Do you think that Putin is an example of toxic masculinity, someone with a small man syndrome? Do you agree with that assessment of him?
Well, I've never met Vladimir Putin. What I know is that he has been responsible for perpetrating the most appalling war on the European continent in decades, that has involved the targeting of women, raping women and children, the systematic bombing of civilians. We saw the appalling shopping centre attack last week. So he clearly is capable of very, very evil acts, I think is what we know. Yeah, I don't pretend that I can conduct a psychological analysis of him, nor do I think it's helpful, because ultimately what we need to make sure is we are supplying the Ukrainians with all of the equipment, all of the political support that they need to win this war.
So you're worried? Are you worried about that, Liz Truss? Because that psychological analysis comes from the Prime Minister and the Defence Secretary. The toxic masculinity.
I'm not worried. I'm not worried about it. I'm just saying that that what we need to do is to continue to support Ukraine, and that is the only way that we are going to end this war. It's the only way that we are going to be able to hold Russia to account for what they've done, and it's the only way that we are going to protect European security in the long term.
This idea of toxic masculinity that Boris Johnson raises, you're a female leader. Is there an argument that this is to do with being a man, a small man in Ben Wallace's mind? Do you think there's a connection there that female leaders would be less pointlessly aggressive?
I think that both women and men are capable of terrible and appalling acts. And clearly, Vladimir Putin is somebody who has perpetrated the most appalling war, a very indiscriminate war targeting civilians and involving the committing of numerous violations of the Geneva Convention. That's the way that's the way I see it. But the issue that we have to deal with as the Western Alliance is to bring that war to an end. And the reasons why he's done it, one of them is he was able to because Ukraine wasn't sufficiently defended. Yeah. And that's the lesson that we have to learn.
As the Foreign Secretary, you'll have been watching recent events in America, of course, when it comes to abortion. Do you have a view on that? Do you think it has made a backward step when it comes to women's rights?
I do agree with the Prime Minister on this issue. I do think it is a backward step. And I think the laws that we have in the United Kingdom are the right laws on abortion and sensible. And I'm pleased to live in a country where that is the political consensus, and we are not engaged, as appears to be the case in the United States, of endless debate on these issues.
Is there anything we can do to welcome people from America who might want to have abortions here? Is that a possibility?
Well, I'm sure that those discussions are going on within the United States and neighboring nations.
But should there be? I mean, we're not neighbouring, but we are a close ally of the United States. Could we have any role in that, do you think?
Well, that is not something that we are looking at. I think the broader issue is making sure that women's rights continue to move forward. I had a meeting yesterday with women foreign ministers at NATO, talking about the fact that we sometimes assume that greater freedom, greater rights just go in one direction. But what we are seeing is the rolling back of rights across the world. And if you look at what's happening in Afghanistan and the appalling restrictions on women and girls by the Taliban, if you look at what's happening in Ukraine and the use of systematic rape against women and the use of sexual violence. So we simply cannot rest in fighting for these rights and fighting for these freedoms. And it's always very, very dangerous to take these things for granted.
Liz Truss, thank you so much for joining us today.